Welcome to Section 3, Groking and Owning Side Effects in Function Components. What we'll learn in this section: first, we'll use hooks to fetch our blog posts from a third-party API. Then, in video 3.2, we'll use hooks to access the browser API above and beyond React rendering. In the third video of the section, we'll use hooks to manage input field focus in our app. And finally, in video 3.4, we'll fetch our blog posts in a centralized store, accessible by multiple components without using Redux anymore. So, on with video 3.1. We're going to start off this video with some React Lifecycle examples as we fetch our blog posts by sending a request to a third-party API on the web. In this video, instead of loading our blog posts from a local data file in JSON format, we'll fetch it from a third-party API on the web. We'll do this with hooks and see how to manage the idiosyncrasies of asynchronous events affecting our state with useEffect. So, in the last section, when we were grabbing data from a local file, how did we hydrate our app's components? We created a context instance in this file, post_list context. The data file was read in, directly imported into the posts variable. We set up some categories. Then we worked some magic with random numbers in order to end up with a posts array with each post assigned a random category. At this point, with the context created in post_list context, we then simply set up the provider with the value of some posts with the categories. And all the children wrap around this provider will have access to these values. Great. Now, though, we have to work a little harder. So first of all, we import useState, but also useEffect. We'll see what that's about in a minute. And we also import Axios, which is a package that enables us to make requests to an external API on a server. Now, before we set up categories, and we did the same thing here, we've also added some dates because in the post.json file, we did have dates edited in. We postponed doing this magic to insert the categories until after we actually get the posts from the server. So let's see. Just as in the original version, you can see that we have a useState, some posts, and here too we have some posts. But the difference is we're also adding a setter. And before, when we initialized the state, when it was first created with the actual posts read from the file, this time, of course, we're initializing to an empty array. The useEffect hook is used to deal with the outside world, where things change and effects take place. Time exists, you have to wait. It's the real world. The first thing we want to do is to fetch some data, and we want to use the async await approach because it's much cleaner and simpler to work with. However, effect itself cannot actually be an async function itself, so we create the fetch data function and then we invoke it immediately. So let's take a look at it. Here's our useEffect. Let's open it up a bit so we can see the whole thing. We assign to result post the result of invoking Axios with a URL. Now that we have our result posts array, then we'll work some magic. But instead of only applying the category to each post in the list, we also add in dates. Then, after we've set up the posts the way we want them and the way we expect them, we set some posts. Here we actually invoke the setter itself. Okay. Now, what's this strange syntax at the end? Well, useEffect is sort of like component did mount in a lifecycle and allows us to work with the lifecycle, right? After the actual useEffect function. The second parameter is a list. That's why it's an array. It's an array of variables to watch out for and also do updates. So useEffect actually is component did mount and component update. We wanted to reread, then we would simply have to include the some posts state variable here, and then every time that changed, let's say we reset it to nothing when we wanted to get some more, then this useEffect function would be triggered again. As it stands, it'll only be triggered once to mounting. If we didn't put that second parameter in, it would be triggered over and over again, which would be a race condition and would actually be an infinite loop. So that's useEffect. Another place we have to work a little harder is on the post listing page itself. Now, what changes do we have to make? The first change is that whereas in the last version, when we initialized the states, we actually assumed that the data was available. Now we can't do that. So as we'll see, there are two changes. First of all, the post list has a setter also, and we initialize with an empty array. We do the same thing for the category list. The other states same as before. The second place we have to work harder is to take into account that we've got to do something if the data hasn't arrived yet or there was some kind of error. So the first thing we do is, if post list is not initialized itself yet, then we make a nice little spinner so that people can see that everything is just loading. Okay? The second place where we have to work a little harder is to take into account the fact that we do need to update and set the value of post list and category list. After that, everything should just work. So here's our blog. As you can see, the data is arriving, and we've successfully hydrated our blog from the web using useEffect. So what did we do? We learned how to fetch data from a third-party API with the useEffect hook right in the context instance. And then on the post listing page, we also saw how to avoid race conditions and to catch any errors like data's not coming or the data hasn't arrived yet,